Have you ever felt trapped in a seemingly hopeless situation, as if everything was stacked against you, as if your dreams were too big for your current environment? What if I told you there was a way to thrive, even in life's darkest moments? Like Joseph, the young Hebrew sold into slavery by his own brothers, yet flourished amidst the chaos. Stay with me until the end. What you'll discover next may surprise you. The story of Joseph of Egypt is not just an ancient biblical tale. It is a journey of faith, resilience, and prosperity in difficult times. It is about a man who endured betrayal, slavery, and unjust imprisonment, yet carried within him a divine promise that could not be erased by circumstances. And here's the key point. Joseph prospered not because of his environment, but because of God's presence in his life. This changes everything. How many times have you felt wronged, like you were paying a high price for something that wasn't even your fault? Joseph experienced exactly that. He was falsely accused, locked in a cell, and forgotten by those who promised to help him. But at no point did he lose touch with God's purpose for him. Biblical prosperity isn't just about money or positions. It's about aligning your life with the heavens, even when everything seems to be falling apart around you. Have you ever experienced this? And that's precisely where the turning point begins, because Joseph, even as a slave, attracted favor. Even imprisoned, he continued to serve with excellence. Even when unjustly accused, he maintained his integrity. This teaches us that prosperity is not the absence of problems, but an attitude toward them. And the most curious thing, the Bible says in Genesis 39:2 that the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. Imagine being called prosperous while behind bars. This defies all human logic, and at the same time reveals a powerful spiritual principle. Looking at this journey, we realize there's something the system doesn't teach, something self-help books can't capture. It's a prosperity born of intimacy with God, faithfulness in the small details, resilience in times of pain, and the courage to maintain one's vision even in the valley. Joseph had all of this, and that's what we're going to talk about here, because perhaps you're living in your own personal Egypt right now, feeling like there's no way out, that no one sees you, that your gifts are being stifled. But what if this place is precisely the training ground for something greater? Perhaps what holds you back today will propel you tomorrow. Perhaps your cell is your training ground. Joseph didn't know when the door would open, but he prepared every day as if it were tomorrow. And it's this kind of attitude that transforms destinies. Stay with me, because next we'll dive into the practical lessons Joseph's life reveals about thriving where no one prospers, about finding favor where there is only contempt, and about how your gifts, like Joseph's, can be the key to activating what God has already placed in your future. And perhaps you're now thinking, but does this apply to my life today? The answer is yes. This story wasn't just recorded as a biblical memory, but as an eternal principle. And this is where I want to invite you to reflect with me. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Sharing your perspective can not only strengthen this community of faith, but also help others who are going through similar times and need a word of encouragement. Your story could be the bridge that allows someone to continue believing. Also, if you're enjoying this journey through Joseph's story and want to continue receiving content that inspires you to experience the prosperity that comes from God, please like this video. This will greatly help spread the message and allow more lives to be reached through this word. Your participation is what makes this channel grow and touches hearts that might never otherwise hear it. And of course, if you haven't signed up yet, click the button and join us. It's not just about numbers, it's about building a community that believes it's possible to thrive even in the desert, as long as we're connected to divine purpose. Each sign up is a sign that this message continues to resonate, bringing light where there's darkness and hope where there's doubt. Now that you understand the essence of the prosperity Joseph experienced, even in prison, let's continue exploring the details that made his journey so transformative. It's curious how even in the face of extreme conditions, certain people seem to carry something invisible that makes them flourish where many wither. Joseph is one such figure. Sold into slavery, torn from his land, without family support, without a safety net, he was thrust into a hostile and humiliating environment. But Genesis 39:2 reveals a hidden truth that completely changes the interpretation of his journey. The Lord was with Joseph and he prospered. How can someone thrive in a system that only seeks to erase their identity? The answer is far from logical, but it is deeply spiritual. And understanding this can transform your scarcity mindset into an impactful posture. This passage isn't just about survival. It's about development, influence, and divine revelations amidst the backdrop of pain. To thrive in this context is to manifest something that doesn't depend on the external, but overflows from the internal. Joseph was a slave, yes, but he didn't have a slave mentality. He didn't define himself by the chains on his feet, but by the promise in his heart. This breaks patterns. In an environment that didn't value his origins, God began to reveal the value of his essence. And this distinction is powerful. It's not about what they did to you, it's about who God says you are. Here's a key that few realize. Biblical prosperity doesn't begin when everything goes right. It begins when you decide to maintain your truth amidst chaos. Joseph's story shows how internal decisions can change destinies. He decided to maintain his posture, his excellence, his faith, even when everything around him screamed, "You've lost." This kind of strength isn't learned from ordinary books. It comes from above. It's a divine code that operates within vulnerability, transforming servitude into mission. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this verse also points to something even more provocative. The text says that Joseph prospered, but it doesn't specify that he became rich. This deconstructs the materialistic idea of prosperity. We're talking about something broader, more elevated. To prosper here is to succeed in your purpose, even in hostile terrain. It's to be light in the darkness. It's to move forward when there's no visible path. God's presence doesn't eliminate challenges, but it redefines how you navigate each one. This presence generated in him an energy of authority that set him apart, even in Potiphar's house. He had no position, he had credibility, he had no physical freedom, he had spiritual influence, and this influence made Potiphar see in him something no one saw in others: trust. Joseph didn't seek promotion, he simply manifested his presence, and this attracted favor. This is true prosperity. When you live so aligned with your purpose that you don't have to chase opportunities, they come to you. Joseph teaches us that to prosper is to endure with faith while building in silence. It's to be faithful in secret. Because it was behind the scenes of slavery that he prepared himself for the leadership of Egypt. The skills he would use as governor were honed while he was just another servant. What no one sees is often where God works most, and this truth changes everything. Comment below. That makes sense to me. I want to know if this reflection touched you in any way. It's amazing how, in the face of life's greatest obstacles and limitations, there's something that can get us moving again, and it doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. In Joseph's story, there's a hidden truth that deconstructs many of our ideas about success, progress, and even luck. He had no position of influence, no freedom of choice, no material resources, but he had something that changed everything: the presence of God. And this presence wasn't symbolic or theoretical, it was active. It generated transformation, even where the environment said it was impossible to prosper. The Bible says that the Lord was with Joseph and he prospered. This phrase carries incredible spiritual and emotional power. It shows that external circumstances don't define your destiny. It's not the system, the people around you, or your economic or family background. It's the one who walks with you within. This divine presence not only accompanied Joseph, it shaped his mindset, strengthened his decisions, and revealed strategies where everyone else saw only ruin. True prosperity from a biblical perspective is about alignment with purpose and connection to the source of life, not about immediate results or social status. And the most intriguing thing is that this presence didn't prevent Joseph from experiencing pain, injustice, and loss. But each of these phases was part of a deeper journey with eternal impact. Thriving like Joseph isn't about avoiding suffering. It's about being sustained by something higher during it. Joseph's faith didn't allow him to escape prison. It kept him whole within it. He didn't lose his identity, didn't become bitter, didn't disconnect from heaven. And that, yes, is thriving. When the heart remains steadfast, when values don't become corrupted, when gifts remain active even without recognition. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a powerful detail that many overlook. Joseph lived in a reality where nothing favored his growth, but God's presence gave him a vision that transcended physical limits. This presence unlocks invisible possibilities, That's why he thrived in Potiphar's house, generating trust and results. That's why, even in prison, he became an example of management and wisdom. Where you see prison, God sees preparation. Where the world sees slavery, heaven sees strategy. This inner prosperity is what gives us resilience in the face of criticism, stability in the face of loss, and discernment in the face of false opportunities. Joseph didn't prosper because he wanted to be seen. He prospered because he carried something greater. God's presence reconfigures everything. It doesn't just change the environment, it changes you. And when you change, the environment has no choice. It begins to respond to your new frequency. This explains why Joseph stood out where no one expected. It was about essence, not appearance. If this insight is already making you rethink how you've been approaching your own journey, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." I want to know who is awakening to this understanding. Joseph didn't arrive at Potiphar's house with prestige, a resume, or any credentials. He arrived as a slave, a foreigner reduced to the bare minimum of dignity. But even in this setting, something about him stood out. And it wasn't physical strength, political influence, or social charisma. It was an inner posture, a mindset shaped by the presence of God, which made each task an opportunity to reveal purpose. Joseph served with excellence even when no one demanded it of him. He didn't expect recognition for doing his best. He did his best because he knew who was with him. This reveals a powerful principle. Being faithful in the little things prepares the spirit to manage the much. In Potiphar's house, Joseph didn't just obey orders, he transformed environments. He began by taking care of basic tasks, but because of his dedication, organization, and discernment, Potiphar began to notice that everything Joseph touched prospered. This practical impact didn't come from Egyptian techniques or sophisticated training. It was the fruit of the presence that walked with him, the silent dedication, the integrity that manifested behind the scenes. Joseph didn't serve as one who expects applause. He served as one who understands that even the simplest place can be sacred ground if God is there. This part of the journey makes us reflect on the decisions we make every day. Are we waiting for great opportunities to begin giving our best? Or are we, like Joseph, seizing every opportunity to hone our character and reveal excellence? Because yes, serving well when no one is looking is what opens doors that no one can close. And these doors are not just for professional advancement, but for inner growth, spiritual maturity, and revelations that only appear when we are faithful in secret. Potiphar entrusted everything to Joseph, and it wasn't just operational trust, it was soulful trust. He saw in Joseph something that transcended the ordinary. There was a spirit of governance, a strategic vision, an ability to solve problems without victimizing himself. Joseph wasn't just a good servant, he already carried within him the traits of a leader, and this leadership came from a heart shaped by the presence of God. It wasn't a title that transformed him into an administrator, it was his attitude before the title that qualified him. This shows that prosperity begins when you transform any task into a mission. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we look at this part of the story, we realize that Joseph was already being prepared to rule a nation while caring for a man's household. This silent transition, this training disguised as routine, is what many overlook. To prosper is to know how to decipher the behind the scenes, to understand that God's movements are not always evident, but always intentional. Joseph didn't complain about his position. He transformed the role he was given. And this taught us more about true prosperity than any theory. If this understanding is generating new insights for you, comment below. I'm on this journey too. I'd love to hear from anyone else who's felt this call to quiet excellence. Temptation often arises at times when we're gaining ground, gaining confidence, and moving closer to something greater. Joseph was no different. After becoming a steward in Potiphar's household, he encountered a situation that could have completely changed the course of his life. His master's wife began persistently trying to seduce him. Joseph was young, far from his family, with no one to monitor his actions. He could have given in, taken advantage of the opportunity, perhaps even gained more human advantages. But there lay the true test. It wasn't just a choice between right and wrong, it was a decision that would reveal who he was when no one was looking. And that, indeed, is prosperity of character. This moment is a watershed moment, and perhaps one of the most underrated in Joseph's journey. Because if he had fallen, everything God was silently building would have been compromised. but he chose the hardest, loneliest, and most valuable path: to resist. Not out of pride nor out of fear. He resisted because he knew his identity was non-negotiable. Joseph's integrity was a seed that would later bear magnificent fruit. And this raises a reflection. How often do we sacrifice our essence for fleeting conveniences? Prospering isn't just about achieving things, it's about upholding the truth even when it seems to cost us something. This episode reveals a backstory to prosperity that few people discuss: the ability to say no when everything seems to say yes. Joseph had reasons to feel abandoned, wronged, forgotten by God. But his faith was deeper than his pain. His mindset was grounded in something eternal, and this shaped his decisions. He didn't see the situation as a shortcut to the top, but as a test of inner development. And there, in the silence of rejection, God was writing a story that would reach the palace. Because character is stronger than opportunity, and purpose is not traded for momentary pleasure. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because when Joseph flees temptation, he doesn't just protect his integrity, he activates a chain of events that will accelerate his purpose. Even if, in the short term, he is unjustly punished, in the long term, he is repositioned for something no one could have foreseen. There is a silent impact to the right decision. When you maintain your truth, the spiritual universe aligns. Choosing integrity attracts divine favor and blocks subtle sabotage. This teaches us that prosperity also means knowing how to identify what appears to be progress, but is actually a trap. If this understanding connected with something within you, comment below. This makes sense to me. I want to know who is strengthening their spirit to maintain their purpose, even when no one is watching. Prison is perhaps one of the cruelest settings in Joseph's journey, not only because of the physical isolation, but also because of the injustice that created it. After resisting temptation and remaining true to his integrity, he was falsely accused and thrown into a place where, in human eyes, there was no escape. And it is precisely at this point in the narrative that Joseph's inner strength is revealed most intensely. Injustice did not kill his vision. His dreams planted by God were not torn away by the hands of men. Joseph's mentality was not distorted by suffering. He did not allow the setting to dictate the value of his essence, nor did he allow the silence of prison to drown out the sound of his promise. This phase of Joseph's life carries immense emotional weight, because many of us, when faced with injustice, are tempted to disbelieve, to abandon the plan, to conclude that God has forgotten. But Joseph shows us another way. He didn't have the comfort of freedom, but he did have the companionship of the divine presence. He had no control over the calendar, but he kept his focus on destiny. This is a powerful revelation about how to build purpose even when everything around seems ruined. Prosperity at this moment was about continuing to believe in the impossible and cultivating gifts amidst pain. In prison, Joseph didn't close himself off from life. He continued to serve, interpreting dreams, connecting people, being a bridge. It's as if his vision was stronger than any cell. And this teaches us something rare, that true dreams don't depend on favorable circumstances to keep pulsing. They simply need to be nourished with faith, even in the most challenging phases. This detail of Joseph's journey shows that injustice has no power over a promise. And what's more, it shows that the time of waiting, when lived with vision, becomes preparation, not punishment. Joseph saw beyond. While others saw a prison, he saw a laboratory for transformation. While others merely counted the days, he counted the lessons. This attitude changes everything, because not every limiting environment needs to be a mental prison. And Joseph proves this. He didn't lose his light. He didn't extinguish his gifts. On the contrary, he refined them. And when the time came, he was ready. Because instead of wasting energy on anger or complaint, he directed everything toward inner growth. This confronts us. Are we allowing injustice to extinguish our dreams, or are we, like Joseph, building a silent legacy that will be revealed in due time? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something extraordinary about this kind of active waiting. It's a waiting with posture, with discernment, with surrender. Joseph wasn't living in a lost time. He was living in a hidden time, where heaven worked silently to activate something that no human system could prevent. And this truth, when understood, gives us the strength to continue, even when we don't see open doors, even when injustice seems to prevail, because purpose, just like Joseph's, doesn't depend on human merit. It springs from the heart of God and manifests itself in those who decide not to stop. Comment: I'm on this journey too. I want to know who has sustained the vision even when everything seems to say it's over. In prison, Joseph did not remain silent. He continued to exercise what he already carried within himself, a rare, spiritual ability, almost incomprehensible to the naked eye. Interpreting dreams, what could have been merely a curious talent, revealed itself as a strategic tool for transformation and impact. That ability wasn't born there. It was developed throughout the journey, refined amidst the backstage of pain. Joseph didn't stop practicing his gift just because he wasn't on a worthy stage. He knew that gifts don't depend on environment, but on activation, and activating what God has placed within. You, even in anonymity, is one of the greatest forms of prosperity. The interesting thing here is that Joseph didn't seek fame. He offered meaning. He translated visions and revelations, connecting people with divine answers in moments of confusion. And it was precisely this dedication that took him out of his cell and into the palace. Because when you develop what you have, even if no one sees it, there comes a time when God makes someone see. It was like that with Pharaoh, a man tormented by an unexplained dream, searching for someone who could decipher not only the images, but also the purposes behind them. And Joseph, who had already been discreetly interpreting dreams in prison, was remembered at just the right moment. This passage reveals something many people overlook. Thriving isn't just about waiting for a miracle, it's about preparing for it. Joseph developed his skills while no one offered a platform. He grew without an audience, and this has everything to do with us. How often do we let our talents lie dormant because we think we're not in the ideal place to use them, when in fact it's in the most unlikely of places that God proves there's purpose? Joseph's ability opened doors because it was accompanied by spiritual sensitivity, practical wisdom, and obedience. It wasn't just a gift, it was mastery. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because interpreting dreams wasn't just about unraveling symbols, it was about discerning directions, decisions, and moments. Joseph didn't just deliver meaning, he revealed strategies, and this shows that spiritual gifts, when used purposefully and responsibly, have the power to activate revelations that change realities. Joseph didn't just explain dreams, he offered answers that protected entire nations, and this inspires us to develop what God has entrusted to us, with dedication, boldness, and awareness. Because gifts are not for self-promotion, they are bridges between heaven and earth. The impact of Joseph's skill was so great that his name went from unknown to authority in a matter of hours. But the truth is, he was already an authority before the palace, because authority begins in the spirit, not in office. And this changes the way we view our own preparation. What you carry today may be waiting only for a moment of activation, and that moment will be the fruit of your perseverance. Joseph teaches us that developing talents, even in silence, is a divine strategy for advancement. Comment below. This makes sense to me. I want to know who has felt God calling them to activate abilities that seemed forgotten. Joseph didn't reach the top by chance, nor by immediate recognition. His journey is marked by an intense and silent wait, where preparation was made far from the spotlight, behind the scenes of pain, injustice, and anonymity. From slave to governor, his transformation wasn't sudden. It was the result of a spiritual, emotional, and practical development that took time, faith, and endurance. And herein lies one of the most powerful truths about prosperity. It doesn't reveal itself when everything around you is ready, but when you are ready within. God's timing is never late, but it almost always requires us to learn to remain purposeful. Joseph was remembered by Pharaoh precisely when his spiritual maturity was aligned with the magnitude of the responsibility he would receive. It wasn't just about getting out of prison. It was about assuming a position that would impact an entire nation. God didn't just want to free him, he wanted to position him. And positioning requires more than desire. It requires preparation. Joseph didn't arrive at the palace unprepared. He already carried within himself a governmental mindset, a strategic language, and wisdom honed in difficult times. This reveals that the time of waiting is, in fact, a time of internal adjustment. It is when God is organizing not only the stage, but also the heart of the character. The impact of this turning point teaches us that prosperity isn't just about achievement, it's about transformation. Joseph was no longer the young dreamer who provoked his brothers with visions of the future. He now possessed discernment, self-control, and a posture that conveyed confidence. This shows how processes shape not only our capabilities, but our very essence. He no longer wanted to prove something to anyone, he wanted to serve. And this desire, aligned with the heavenly vision, is what transforms promises into reality. Because thriving isn't about getting there before everyone else, but being ready when God says, now. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because divine change always comes with revelations that transcend logic. Joseph was called to interpret a dream, but in reality he was being positioned to interpret a nation. When he speaks to Pharaoh, he doesn't just translate images, he proposes solutions, strategies, decisions. He transforms a spiritual vision into public policy. And this shows us that prosperity that comes from heaven always generates a collective impact. Joseph didn't prosper alone, he prospered to save. His journey was connected to the destiny of thousands of people, and this completely changes the way we view our own preparation. The promise finds God's timing at the exact point where the heart is steadfast, the mind is awake, and the spirit is surrendered. Joseph didn't exalt himself, didn't present himself as victim or hero. He simply made himself available. And it was this willingness that made heaven manifest through him. True prosperity is all about being available for something greater. It's not about the throne, but about who you become on the way to it. And when you understand this, you begin to value not only the destination, but every step of the journey. Comment below, that makes sense to me. I'd love to hear from anyone who understands that waiting time is an essential part of the plan. Joseph's prosperity wasn't an isolated event. It was a continuous result of choices, vision, and attitude toward life. And this raises an inevitable question. How can we apply these principles practically today? Because it's not enough to admire the story. We need to understand how it relates to our routines, our decisions, our behind-the-scenes experiences. Prospering like Joseph means, above all, living with spiritual awareness and emotional intelligence. It's aligning your inner rhythm with the purpose God has already designed, even if everything around you still seems out of place. And this application is indeed possible. It's more accessible than it seems. It all starts with mindset. Joseph never acted like a victim, even when he had every reason to. This shows that how you see yourself directly influences what you attract. When you act like someone with a purpose, even without titles or ideal conditions, environments begin to react differently. Joseph didn't expect everything to be perfect. He transformed the imperfect with his attitude. And this is a practical decision. You can choose to maintain your essence, your excellence, and your vision, even when no one recognizes you. Prosperity has more to do with this silent constancy than with immediate visible results. Another point is the way he served. Joseph transformed every role into a mission. He didn't just do what he was told, he gave his best. This generated real impact and opened doors without having to force anything. Today, this translates into giving your best to whatever is in your hands now, without expecting applause, without depending on ideal conditions. And this dedication, when done with an aligned heart, attracts favor. It is in this kind of movement that heaven manifests itself, in the hidden, insincere effort, in fidelity to the truth. To thrive today is to understand that nothing is too small when you serve a greater purpose. It also has to do with spiritual sensitivity. Joseph wasn't just skilled, he was connected. He discerned moments, understood people, and deciphered complex situations with wisdom. This shows that prosperity also requires prayer, intimacy with God, and active listening to the Spirit. It's not enough to work hard. You need to understand the right timing for each thing. Recognize when heaven is signaling something to you. This requires an internal journey, a positioning that goes beyond appearances. And when you begin to walk with this spiritual listening, your actions become more precise, your steps more strategic, and your impact more profound. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because applying Joseph's prosperity isn't just about what you do, it's about who you're becoming in the process. You don't need to wait for a promotion to start thinking like someone who governs. You can today adjust your way of thinking, acting, and reacting based on this hidden truth. There's a greater plan underway. Prosperity is being true to your essence as the plan unfolds, and this fidelity transforms destinies. Joseph showed that it's not the environment that defines you, but your attitude toward it. And this can be experienced now, at work, at home, in your relationships. Write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." I want to know who's willing to experience this prosperity that springs from within and grows until it overflows. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this story is much more than biblical events. It conveys principles that make perfect sense for our journey today. And if this content helped you see prosperity from a new perspective with more depth and purpose, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. This shows me that everything we've built in this conversation is generating real value for you and bringing you closer to future content that continues along the same lines. Also, leave a comment with the phrase, "I'm with you until the end," just so I know who was truly with me on this journey until the very last minute. It's in these details that the connection is strengthened, the community grows, and the message gains traction where it needs to reach. Oh, and if this topic really touched you, please leave a like on the video. It's not just a button, it's a sign that this conversation resonated with you. And now, to keep this flow of revelations and learnings going, there's a video right here that complements all of this and will help you take another step on this journey. Click and stay with me. There,